Okay, let's talk about something that might just fundamentally change how you see your phone, your job, and, well, the entire global economy.
Yeah, we're looking at excerpts today from Yanis Varoufakis' latest book, Techno-Feudalism: What Killed Capitalism.
That title alone is quite something.
It is deliberately provocative, yeah. And his core argument is even more so. He doesn't think capitalism is just sick or evolving. He argues it's actually dead
Dead. Wow.
and replaced by something he sees as not only new, but significantly worse: techno-feudalism.
Right. And what's really interesting, I found, is how he frames it. It's very personal, partly like a letter to his late father. And he talks about conversations with his daughter, too.
Exactly. It takes what could be incredibly dense economic theory and, grounds it, makes it relatable.
It feels like an argument about how technology, finance, power, they haven't just changed things. They've, according to him, completely reshaped the whole game you live in.
Absolutely. So our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack that central claim. We'll use his examples, his logic from these excerpts.
And try to get our heads around why he thinks capitalism is gone, what this techno-feudalism thing actually looks like.
And maybe why you might already be living inside it, whether you realize it or not.
Okay, so let's start there. Why dead? Not just, changing. He goes back pretty far, even to childhood lessons.
He does. He talks about his father, an engineer, teaching him about materials, iron versus gold, that kind of thing. And this idea from ancient poetry, Hesiod,
Oh, yeah.
that iron didn't just harden our tools, our plows, but it hardened our souls too. How technology shapes us fundamentally.
That's a powerful starting point, and it links to these deeper, almost philosophical ideas about dualities in economics.
Exactly. A bit like, Einstein seeing light as both wave and particle, which his father also apparently told him about. Varoufakis sees similar dualities everywhere in economics.
Okay, like where?
Well, take labor.
Yeah.
He says there's experiential labor, that unique human spark, the inspiration, the stuff you can't really commodify easily.
Right.
And then there's commodity labor, just the raw power to work, the thing you sell for a wage.
And profit comes from?
From capturing that unpaid experiential bit on top of the commodity labor you pay for. That's his take.
Interesting. So it's not just your time, it's your essence, almost.
Kind of. And capital, too. It's not just the factory machines. It's also the power that owning them gives you over people who don't own them.
The control aspect.
Yeah, he uses that famous Mr. Peel story from Western Australia. Peel arrives with machines, supplies, workers, everything. The workers just step off the boat, see free land, and walk off to become farmers. Keel had the capital goods, but zero power because he didn't control the land, the means of survival there.
So capital's power is fundamentally social, based on unequal access.
Exactly. And even money, he argues, following Keynes, isn't simple. Keynes, influenced by relativity, apparently saw money as way more complex than standard economics treated it. Like economists were using flat maps for a curved universe.
So the building blocks themselves are dualistic, complex. And this is all different from feudalism, right? Where there were no real economic choices.
Pretty much. Under feudalism, land and labor weren't really commodities with market prices. Your life was set, power was tied directly to owning land.
Then capitalism arrives and just starts commodifying everything.
Everything it could touch. Common lands, your ability to work, eventually even your desires, your attention. He calls it the freedom to lose. You're free from the Lord? Sure, but also free to starve if you can't sell yourself on the market.
That relentless drive to turn everything into something with an exchange value, it sounds, well, a bit like the Borg from Star Trek he mentions, assimilating everything.
It's a good analogy. And think about advertising. Don Draper types tapping into genuine, uncommodified feelings, the experiential stuff, just to capture your attention, which then becomes the commodity they sell.
Okay, so that's the backdrop of capitalism's relentless commodification, where, in his view, did the system start to fundamentally change or break?
He points quite strongly to the second industrial revolution, driven by electromagnetism. That's when you get really big business, big finance, huge debts.
And this technostructure thing.
Exactly. That term from Galbraith, this kind of nexus of corporate managers, government officials, experts, the people actually running things, coordinating these huge complex systems.
And the world wars, especially WWII, just cemented that.
Massively. The war economy basically proved you could have full employment, huge outprint, if government and big business coordinated closely. It embedded the technostructure as the key decision-making network.
Focused on growth, conglomerates.
Right. And then you throw in mass media like TV, supercharging the attention market. Suddenly the people good at manipulating attention, the Don Drapers, become key players within that technostructure too.
Which leads into that post-war golden age, Bretton Woods, the U.S. rebuilding Europe in Japan.
Pretty much in its own image with that technostructure model. And yeah, it was a unique time. Low unemployment, low inflation, high growth, relatively low inequality. Capitalism seemed to be working, sort of.
But he argues it contained the seeds of its own undoing, which he calls the global minotaur. What's that about?
It kicked off around the mid-60s. The U.S. starts running big trade deficits, meaning dollars are flooding out into the world.
Okay.
Then comes the Nixon shock in '71. Nixon takes the dollar off gold. Suddenly, all those countries holding dollars can't exchange them for gold anymore. They're kind of stuck with them.
So the dollar becomes the default reserve just because there's no alternative?
Pretty much. It gets this exorbitant privilege essential for global trade. And the U.S. proposes a deal to surplus countries like Germany, Japan, later China. Send those dollars back to us. Invest them in Wall Street. Buy our treasury bonds.
Recycling the surpluses.
Exactly. The U.S. gets cheap imports and its deficits financed, seemingly for free, and surplus countries get a place to park their cash. This system, the Minotaur, basically kept the post-Bretton Woods world afloat until 2008.
And somewhere in that Minotaur era, finance went, well, bit crazy. The mad numbers, derivatives.
Oh, yeah. Warren Buffett's weapons of mass financial destruction.
Oh, yeah.
The scale was just mind-boggling. He cites figures like, by 2007, something like $750 trillion wagered on derivatives.
When global income was maybe $75 trillion, that's 10 times.
Insane numbers. And the complexity was almost a feature, not a bug. People could shrug and say, well, nobody really understands them, but everyone kept buying because everyone else was. It got completely detached.
Until it couldn't anymore. 2008, the crash.
The Minotaur collapses. And the response. Central banks print unprecedented amounts of money.
Trillions.
But who got it?
Primarily the very financial institutions that caused the mess. He calls it socialism for financiers. And interest rates are pushed to zero, even negatives.
And that money, it didn't just restart the old economy.
Not really. He argues it didn't flow broadly into new factories or Main Street businesses. A huge chunk went to big business, especially big tech. And what did they do with it? Often they didn't build more stuff in the traditional sense. They invested it in cloud capital.
Cloud capital. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But this cheap money also caused an everything rally. Stocks, bonds, real estate, art. Everything went up, massively decoupling financial markets from the struggling real economy.
Like the London Stock Exchange jumping in March 2020, right at the start of the pandemic lockdown.
Exactly. Deepest recession ever, and the market shrugs and goes up. It shows, for him, that the link was fundamentally broken.
Okay, so that's the historical trajectory, the technostructure, the Minotaur recycling dollars, the 2008 crash, the bailout money flowing into big tech. This sets the stage. Which brings us back to that listener question from the source text.
Right. Now that computers speak to each other, will this network make capitalism impossible to overthrow? Or might it finally reveal its Achilles heel?
And this is where he says, no, it's not capitalism anymore, it's techno-feudalism. The power source has shifted.
Yes. Power isn't primarily about owning traditional capital anymore. It's about owning and controlling cloud capital.
And the internet, which started so open, it got enclosed.
He argues yes. Internet One, built by academics and the military, was this amazing digital commons. Open protocols, free sharing. Kind of anti-market, actually.
But then came the new enclosures.
Exactly. Starting slowly in the Minotaur era, then accelerating massively. The privatization of that commons. You're increasingly forced into these private digital realms. Think about needing an app, needing to give up data just to get a taxi or order food.
Uber, Lyft.
Right. The algorithms dispatch drivers, sure, but their prime directive isn't necessarily the best service or driver welfare. It's maximizing value extraction for the platform owner.
Okay.
This plunder, he says, built cloud capital.
So what is cloud capital? How's it different from, say, owning a car factory?
It's fundamentally different. It's built on these incredibly complex adaptive algorithms, machine learning, stuff that reprograms itself running on specialized hardware like neural networks.
Okay.
And crucially, they're often black boxes. So complex and fast, even the people who design them might not know exactly why they make certain decisions.
And its power, it doesn't come from employing people in the same way.
That's his core point. Traditional capital needed waged labor to create surplus value. Cloud capital, he argues, can reproduce and expand itself without relying on waged labor. It commands free labor.
Free labor. From who?
From Well, from almost everyone.
Yeah.
Us.
Just by using the internet, scrolling, clicking, searching.
Pretty much. And this, he says, creates a whole new class structure under techno-feudalism.
Okay, break that down. Who are the new classes?
First, you have the cloud proles. These are waged workers, but their work is intensely managed, monitored, sometimes even hired and fired by cloud-based algorithms.
Like Amazon warehouse workers tracked constantly, or mechanical Turk workers?
Exactly. Or delivery drivers dispatched and rated by an app. He points out their suffering is similar to old-school proletarians, the speed up, the surveillance, the lack of human recourse. But the boss is an algorithm, a non-corporeal entity.
That's unsettling. He even suggests algorithms could learn to bust unions.
It's a chilling thought he raises, yeah. The potential is there.
Okay, so cloud proles. Who else?
Then there are the cloud serfs. And that, he suggests, is most of us. Anyone who uses these digital platforms.
So if you're on social media, use search engines, stream movies, you're a cloud serf.
In his framework, yes. We provide the essential raw material, our data, our attention, our clicks, our behavioral patterns for free. We are the nodes, the specks of digital dust feeding the machine.
We're not the customer, we're the product. Or maybe we're the livestock.
It's more like we're unwaged laborers producing the value that fuels cloud capital. He contrasts someone like Don Draper trying to craft a clever ad with Alexa or Google Assistant. Draper was broadcasting at you. Alexa is in a constant feedback loop with you. It learns your habits, shapes your choices, curates your reality in a much more systemic, pervasive way. It's modifying your behavior constantly.
Okay, so cloud proles doing algorithmically managed waged work, cloud serfs providing free data and behavioral input. What about traditional business owners?
They become vassal capitalists. They might still own factories, employ people, make things, but they're increasingly dependent on the big platforms to actually sell their goods or services.
Like selling through Amazon Marketplace or the Apple App Store.
Exactly. They're vassals in the cloud fiefs owned by the big tech companies. And like feudal vassals, they have to pay tribute.
Which is the cloud rent.
Precisely. A percentage of their revenue paid to the platform owner, the cloudlist, just for access to the market, to the serfs.
And this rent, he says, has become more important than profit. That's a huge claim.
It is. He argues that rent, which was always secondary, sort of parasitic on profit under capitalism, has staged a stunning revenge, especially after 2008.
Fueled by all that cheap money from central banks.
Yes. That money allowed the cloudlists, the owners of cloud capital, the big tech conglomerates, to rapidly build and expand their cloud fiefs. Their main goal isn't necessarily maximizing profit from production. It's maximizing the extraction of gargantuan cloud rents.
From the vassal capitalists trying to sell on their platforms.
And indirectly from the cloud serfs, whose attention and data make the platforms valuable in the first place.
The Apple App Store taking a 30% cut is a prime example he uses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Apple didn't make the apps mostly. It created a platform, a cloud fief, controlled access, and extracts a huge rent from an army of unwaged app developers and vassal capitalist companies.
Same with Uber or Lyft taking a cut from every ride.
Yeah, wiring precarious workers into their fiefdom and taking a fixed cloud rent from their labor.
And he also ropes in the big asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street.
Yes, arguing that their huge, concentrated ownership across vast swaths of the traditional economy allows them to effectively extract rents through monopoly power, acting almost like financial cloudlists.
And where does all this extracted rent go?
That's a problem. He argues it doesn't circulate back into productive investment the way profits theoretically should. It gets hoarded, stashed in safe assets, property, fine art, crypto, yachts, leading to what he calls toxic stagnation.
So the economy looks busy, money is moving, but it's not actually building much that's broadly useful.
That's the argument. And when we saw that big inflation spike in 2022,
Yeah.
he doesn't see it as just too much money chasing too few goods. He frames it as a power play, reflecting the dominance of cloud capital and its ability to extract rents, contributing to price rises. The tech stock pullback later wasn't capitalism returning, just the end of the zero-interest party that super-fueled cloud capital's valuation.
And countries that haven't invested heavily in their own cloud capital, like Germany.
They risk falling behind. Their traditional manufacturing prowess becomes less competitive if it's not integrated with or protected from dominant foreign cloud capital.
Okay, let's zoom out to the global picture. He talks about a new Cold War. Not like U.S. versus Soviet Union.
No, he argues it's not really about ideology, communism versus capitalism. It's about naked techno-feudal class interests.
Like it.
Meaning the old dark deal, The Minotaur system, where the U.S. recycled global surpluses through Wall Street, is decaying. Why? Because China has built its own powerful cloud capital, think Alibaba, Tencent, TikTok.
And China's tech can extract value differently.
Yes, offered directly through cloud finance and e-commerce within its own ecosystems, or globally, like TikTok. Doesn't necessarily need the dollar recycling system in the same way. This reduces the value of the old dark deal for the U.S. ruling class.
So when the U.S. tries to ban Huawei or force a sale of TikTok, it's not just security concerns.
In his view, it's fundamentally about this economic power struggle. The U.S. trying to maintain its techno-feudal dominance against a rising competitor who's building its own parallel system and refusing to play by the old financial rules.
And China's digital yuan is a major weapon in this.
Potentially, yes. He describes it as a central bank digital currency, CBDC, designed to cut out private banks and, crucially, the U.S.-dominated SWIFT system for international transfers.
How would that work?
He gives this example. A German factory owner, Jürgen, needs to pay a Chinese supplier, Xu. Instead of going through multiple banks, currency conversions, fees, they both just use their central bank digital wallets. Jürgen sends digital yuan directly to Xu's wallet. Instantaneous, basically free.
Cutting out all the intermediaries who extract rents along the way.
Exactly. And bypassing the U.S.'s ability to monitor or sanction transactions. That, he says, is Washington's and the big banks' worst nightmare.
A direct challenge to dollar hegemony built on bypassing the current rentiers.
Precisely. Meanwhile, Europe, he argues, is kind of stuck. Still reliant on its old deal with the U.S., particularly exporters like Germany needing that dollar system, making it vulnerable. And the Global South gets hammered by rising dollar debt costs when U.S. policy shifts.
Okay, let's bring it back down to the individual level. He talks about the death of the liberal individual. That sounds dramatic.
It is. He contrasts his father's generation, where even under capitalism, there was at least a theoretical line between work life and personal life, a sense of self partially outside the market.
With life today, under techno-feudalism.
Yeah. He argues the liberal individual isn't being crushed by some jackbooted dictator, but is being subtly snuffed out by cloud capital's constant behavioral modification.
Yeah.
The platforms encourage you constantly, be yourself, express yourself. But every expression, every click, every preference is captured, analyzed, and used to shape your future behavior, often to sell you something or keep you engaged. That authentic self becomes the raw material, the right to have time, not for sale, not monitored, not monetized. It evaporates.
So living your authentic life online just makes you a more productive serf, providing better data.
That's the bleak implication in his framework, yes.
Yeah.
That private sphere shrinks towards zero.
And politically, what does this mean for left versus right?
He argues it scrambles the old categories. Social democracy, for instance, was built on negotiating with traditional capital and the state over wages and welfare. How do you effectively negotiate with a global cloudlist whose power comes from rent extraction and behavioral modification, not primarily employing your citizens?
And the left, he suggests, is struggling to adapt.
He sees it as fragmented, sometimes focused on internal cultural disputes, and failing to build a broad coalition that speaks for all the groups potentially exploited by this new system: the cloud proles, the serfs, the vassal capitalists, the traditional precariat, those suffering from climate change driven by this extractive model.
It paints a pretty grim picture of the present, but he doesn't just leave it there, right? He does offer some glimpses of alternatives, imagining another now.
Right. He acknowledges the bleakness, but also suggests that maybe these new technologies, the very tools of techno-feudalism, could offer possibilities for liberation that past movements like the Soviets or traditional social democrats simply didn't have.
He touches on crypto first, though, dismissively.
Yeah, he sees it as having started with this potentially emancipatory idea bypassing banks, states, cloud rents, but argues it got captured by libertarian ideology and devolved into just another speculative asset bubble, a kind of private fiat money, not a systemic alternative.
But his own sketches from another now, they're more radical.
Much more. He outlines things like democratized companies. Imagine businesses owned by their employees. One person, one vote, deciding collectively on revenues, pay, investment.
No shareholders, no stock market.
Exactly. It abolishes the traditional wage-profit distinction and the power of private equity. He even speculates it might lead to smaller, more manageable company sizes naturally because huge collectives are hard to run democratically, which could also curb monopolies.
Interesting. And a Social Accountability Act, what's that?
Citizen juries would regularly assess companies based on their social and environmental contributions. Consistently bad scores could lead to penalties, even deregistration, a mechanism for social oversight beyond just profit.
And getting rid of free online services funded by ads and surveillance.
Yes, this is key. Replace it with a micropayment system, he calls it penny for your thought. You'd pay tiny amounts directly to creators or service providers.
But wouldn't that disadvantage people who can't afford it?
He couples it with a universal basic income, or stipend, paid into everyone's central bank digital wallet, which could be used for these micropayments. Plus, a strong bill of digital rights giving you control over your data. If you choose to sell it, you get the money.
So no ads, no hidden tracking, no behavioral modification algorithms trying to hook you.
That's the vision. Control shifts from the cloud lists back to users and creators.
Which connects to his ideas on democratized money.
Right. Central bank digital wallets for everyone, holding the UBI stipend. The central bank could even pay you interest on your savings, drawing money and power away from private banks.
And lending.
Who still exist, but based on actual savings within this monetary commons, overseen by some kind of citizen expert body, not banks creating money through lending. And the state gets funded differently too. Maybe a simple tax on company revenues, not profits, plus taxes on commercial land.
What about internationally? To stop the Minotaur-like imbalances.
He proposes a new digital international accounting unit, Cosmos, for trade settlements. Crucially, it would have automatic levies on both large trade deficits and large surpluses, pushing countries towards balance and ending the cycle of debt crises.
And finally, treating land in the cloud as commons.
Yes, physically, dividing land into commercial and social zones via local citizen bodies, using rent from commercial land to fund social housing. Digitally, managing the cloud through public media centers and municipal apps, think public libraries for the digital age, funded transparently. No ads, no tracking.
So things like transport apps would be run municipally or maybe by driver cooperatives.
Exactly. The goal is shifting control over the infrastructure and the algorithms to users, communities, workers. Driver co-ops could control their own dispatch algorithm, optimizing for driver welfare and user needs, not just platform rent.
Okay, these are big ideas. How does he suggest moving towards something like this? It sounds like a huge leap.
He knows it's not easy. He suggests moving beyond just traditional strikes. Thinking about a cloud rebellion, maybe coordinated boycotts of platforms, or using the collective power of pension funds, which own huge chunks of these tech companies, to demand change.
Using the network against itself, in a way.
Kind of. Leveraging the very tools and interconnectedness of techno-feudalism to build the alternative commons within its shell.
Okay, so let's try and sum up this deep dive into the arguments from the source material. Varoufakis isn't saying capitalism is just hitting a rough patch.
No, his core argument is that it's fundamentally over, replaced by techno-feudalism. The driving force is cloud capital, and the main income stream for the powerful is rent extraction.
And this isn't just, capitalism with bigger computers. It's a structural shift.
A shift creating new classes. Cloud proles managed by algorithm, cloud serfs providing free labor data, vassal capitalists paying tribute.
All dominated by the cloudalists who own the platforms, the cloud fiefs.
And understanding this framework, even if you don't fully agree with it, can really change how you view your own life, your interaction with your phone, your work, the news about tech giants or global trade. It potentially reveals underlying power dynamics.
Right, it gives you a different lens to see the world through.
It helps you ask different questions about who benefits and how.
And the final provocative thought to leave you with, drawn from these ideas in the source. He suggests the very tools that built this system, the networks, the algorithms, the cloud infrastructure, aren't inherently evil.
Right. They could potentially be the tools used to build something entirely different. A genuine digital commons, truly democratized companies, money that serves people, not rentiers.
So the bad news is the potentially bleak reality he describes. But the glimmer of hope, the potential good news, is that the means for change might be embedded within the new landscape itself.
Exactly. The challenge isn't just resisting or regulating the current systems, though that might be part of it. It's about actively imagining and then figuring out how to build that alternative using these powerful new tools. What does building that look like for you in practice, in your community, beyond these glimpses?